Imagine standing on the edge of a world that existed 3.2 million years ago. The air is heavy with the scent of untamed wilderness, a mixture of rich soil and distant smoke from natural fires. Towering trees stand sparse, broken by expanses of tall grasses that sway endlessly under a wind that whispers secrets of change. The sky is a clear, pale blue, yet hints of shifting climates are etched into the very earth beneath your feet. Life here is not static. It is a constant dance of adaptation and survival. This was the Pliocene epoch, a time when the planet itself seemed to be holding its breath. Glaciers in distant lands crept forward and retreated, subtly altering rainfall patterns and the distribution of rivers. Forests that once thrived began to shrink, replaced by open savannas. For the creatures that called this world home, including the ancestors of humans, the rules of existence were being rewritten. Food that was once abundant became scarce, forcing a reevaluation of what could be eaten, how, and when. As we trace the footsteps of early hominins, we notice the first hints of ingenuity, the spark of curiosity that would shape our species. Their survival depended not on brute strength alone, but on keen observation, flexibility, and experimentation. Imagine walking through these grasslands and spotting a cluster of nuts tucked into a crevice, or recognizing the tracks of a grazing animal that could become a meal days later. Every decision was a gamble with life itself. The changing environment demanded new strategies. Those who could adapt to a mixed diet, combining fruits, roots, seeds, and occasional protein, were more likely to survive than those clinging to a single dwindling food source. These early humans were at the forefront of a grand experiment, learning lessons that would ripple across millennia. So ask yourself, if you had been there, could you have spotted the edible from the deadly? Could you have thrived when the very landscape seemed determined to challenge your instincts? In exploring this ancient world, we uncover more than just survival strategies. We uncover the beginnings of innovation, resilience, and the human story itself. If you're intrigued by this journey into the distant past, make sure to like this video and leave a comment sharing what you think early humans relied on most for survival. Your curiosity fuels this exploration, just as curiosity drove our ancestors to navigate a world in flux. 3,200,000 years ago, Earth was a planet in transition. The Pliocene epoch had begun to shift the very foundations of life, and the forces shaping the climate were immense, yet subtle. Temperatures were cooling overall, though not uniformly, creating a mosaic of climates across continents. Ice sheets were forming at the poles, affecting sea levels and triggering alterations in atmospheric circulation. Rainfall patterns shifted unpredictably, turning lush forests into fragmented patches and nurturing the expansion of grasslands. These changes weren't sudden cataclysms, but persistent nudges, forcing every creature to adjust or perish. The impact on ecosystems was profound. Dense tropical forests that once dominated large swaths of Africa began to retreat, leaving open woodlands and savannas where sunlight drenched the earth. Rivers meandered differently, and seasonal variability became more pronounced. Herbivores that relied on constant leafy vegetation faced new challenges. The plants they fed on were scattered, sometimes scarce, and often replaced by tougher, fibrous grasses. Predators, in turn, had to adjust their hunting strategies to cope with animals that were constantly on the move or hidden in the tall grass. The entire food web trembled under the pressure of these climatic shifts. For early hominins, this environmental transformation presented both danger and opportunity. The shrinking forests meant familiar food sources, fruits, leaves, and tender shoots, were no longer reliable. Survival demanded ingenuity, learning to exploit a broader array of edible plants, recognizing seasonal abundance, and perhaps even scavenging opportunistically. These challenges shaped not just what early humans ate, but how they interacted with their surroundings. Observing rainfall patterns, tracking migrating herds, and deciphering the subtle signals of the environment became critical skills. It was a world where knowledge equaled survival. Geology and paleoclimatology today reveal the footprints of these changes. Fossil pollen shows the transition from dense forests to open savannas. Isotopic records in soil and teeth illustrate shifts in water availability, and sediment layers reveal cycles of aridity and wet periods. Through these clues, we glimpse the pressures early humans faced, pressures that demanded flexibility and sparked innovation. Every meal, every gathered root or hunted animal was a lesson in adaptation. In witnessing this ancient climate, we see more than temperature charts or rainfall maps. We see a stage set for evolution itself. The Pliocene subtle yet relentless changes sculpted the behaviors, diets, and survival strategies that would echo through the lineage of humans. The question lingers: how did our ancestors transform these environmental constraints into opportunities for life to thrive? As the forests of the Pliocene slowly receded, a new world emerged, one dominated by vast open grasslands stretching as far as the eye could see. These savannas were a stark contrast to the dense, shadowed woodlands that had previously blanketed much of Africa. Tall grasses, resilient and fibrous, swayed under the wind, creating a living sea that concealed both opportunity and danger. The rise of these grasslands reshaped ecosystems and altered the very rhythm of life for every creature that inhabited them. Herbivores were the first to feel the pressure. Animals adapted to browse on leafy vegetation faced a sudden scarcity of their preferred diet. Those that could graze on grasses, however, found an abundance of food, even if it was tougher and required more energy to digest. Teeth evolved to meet the challenge, growing stronger and more specialized. Grazing animals thrived, and with them, predators who learned to stalk across the open plains. The landscape had become a theater of survival, where speed, cunning, and awareness of the environment were crucial. For early hominins, these grasslands were both a test and an opportunity. The retreat of forests meant that familiar sources of fruits and tender leaves were no longer reliably available, but the openness of the savanna revealed new possibilities. Tubers hidden beneath the soil, nuts and seeds scattered across the plains, and even opportunities to scavenge or hunt small game. Learning to move efficiently across these open landscapes, to recognize edible plants, and to understand the patterns of animals became essential survival skills. The expansion of grasslands forced early humans to become more versatile, adaptive, and observant than ever before. Paleontological evidence paints this transformation vividly. Fossilized grasses, soil isotopes, and the wear on ancient teeth reveal a shift in diet and habitat. Early hominins were not just passive witnesses. They were active participants in this changing world, exploring, experimenting, and learning to navigate an ecosystem that demanded ingenuity. The rise of grasslands was more than a simple shift in vegetation. It was a turning point in evolution. It challenged creatures to adapt, reshaped predator-prey dynamics, and set the stage for profound changes in early human behavior. In this open, sun-drenched world, the rules of survival were being rewritten, and the first seeds of innovation and resilience in hominins were beginning to sprout. In the shifting landscapes of the Pliocene, early hominins faced a world where survival demanded creativity in what they ate. Retreating forests had stripped away reliable sources of fruit and foliage, leaving a mosaic of open grasslands interspersed with pockets of woodland. Here, food was no longer abundant or predictable. Adaptation became essential, not only in movement and shelter, but in diet itself. Fossilized teeth and isotopic analyses reveal astonishing flexibility. Early humans were not strictly frugivores or herbivores. They were omnivorous pioneers, sampling a range of edible resources. Hard seeds, fibrous, roots, tubers, and even occasional insects entered the diet, each requiring different processing techniques and tools. The wear patterns on teeth indicate a remarkable ability to handle a variety of textures and toughness, evidence of an evolving dietary sophistication. Evolution was sculpting not just the body, but the strategies for finding and consuming food. This period also hints at the early stages of risk assessment. Choosing to dig for a nutrient-rich root in open terrain could mean exposure to predators, yet the payoff could sustain a group for days. Identifying which nuts were safe to eat, which fruits had ripened, and when certain animals were in season, required keen observation and learning, a cognitive toolkit already beginning to shape human intelligence. Adaptation was not random. It was guided by necessity, experience, and perhaps the earliest forms of teaching within small groups. Beyond mere sustenance, these dietary choices influenced social dynamics. Sharing a savannas, particularly large or hard-to-obtain resource, could strengthen bonds, establish hierarchies, and shape cooperation. The very act of finding, processing, and distributing food became a force that molded community life and cognitive evolution. Early hominins were becoming ecological strategists, navigating a world in flux by turning necessity into knowledge. So, think about it. If you were wandering those grasslands relying on roots, seeds, and occasional meat, how would you decide what to eat? And when? What strategies would you invent to survive in a world where the forest no longer sheltered your meals? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Imagine the daily challenges our ancestors faced and the choices that shaped the human journey. As early hominins navigated the open savannas, survival increasingly relied on ingenuity. The Pliocene world presented both opportunity and danger. Nutritious roots lay beneath hardened soil, bones encased marrow, and tough plant fibers challenged the limits of teeth. This was the dawn of a remarkable shift, the use of tools to access food that would otherwise remain unreachable. Stone flakes, simple yet precise, were among the first instruments that transformed eating into a skilled craft. They allowed hominins to cut through fibrous plants, crack open nuts, and even scrape meat from bones left by larger predators. Each tool represented a leap in cognitive ability, a tangible manifestation of problem-solving, planning, and foresight. The hands, once used primarily for grasping, became instruments of creativity, capable of shaping objects to manipulate the world. The archaeological record supports this evolution vividly. Cut marks on bones from 3.2 million years ago suggest the intentional extraction of marrow, while wear patterns on stones hint at repeated use for processing tough vegetation. Food was no longer passively consumed, it was actively transformed, prepared, and manipulated to maximize energy intake. This technological edge allowed early humans to exploit ecological niches that were inaccessible to other creatures, creating a subtle yet powerful advantage in the struggle for survival. Tool use also influenced social dynamics. Sharing a freshly cracked nut or a carefully prepared tuber required cooperation, communication, and perhaps the earliest forms of teaching. Skills passed from one individual to another were not just survival tactics, they were seeds of culture, of knowledge embedded in the social fabric. The savanna, once simply a stage of danger, became a laboratory for experimentation, learning, and innovation. Every simple stone or sharpened fragment tells a story of adaptation and persistence. In learning to manipulate their environment, early hominins not only expanded their diet, but began the long journey toward mastery of the natural world. Survival was no longer purely instinctual, it was inventive, deliberate, and profoundly human. The Pliocene savannas were not an empty stage. They were alive with the tension of countless species vying for survival. Early hominins were just one player in a complex ecosystem where competition for food was fierce, constant, and often unforgiving. Every root unearthed, every nut cracked, and every small animal scavenged was part of a delicate balance, influenced by the presence of grazers, carnivores, and omnivores alike. Large herbivores dominated the plains, consuming vast quantities of grasses and shaping the environment itself. Their movement patterns dictated where resources would flourish and where early humans might find opportunity. Predators, meanwhile, lurked at the edges of vision, shaping not only behavior but migration and foraging strategies. The savanna was a chessboard of survival, where every step and choice could tip the balance between life and death. Early hominins learned to navigate this competitive web. Flexibility was key. Some relied on scavenging carcasses abandoned by lions or hyenas, while others sought underground tubers or small prey that avoided attention from larger animals. The ability to assess risk, identify openings, and exploit niches became as crucial as physical endurance. They were opportunistic, adaptive, and above all, observant, reading the subtle cues of their environment to maximize survival. Fossil evidence underscores this interplay. Tooth marks on bones, the coexistence of predator and prey remains in archaeological layers, and isotopic studies reveal the overlap and competition for resources. These findings highlight not only the struggle for sustenance, but also the ingenuity required to thrive in such a contested world. Early humans were learning the rules of the savanna, negotiating the challenges of coexisting with faster, stronger, or more numerous species. The competition did more than shape diet. It drove innovation. Strategies developed to avoid predators, locate scarce food, and cooperate within groups laid the groundwork for complex behaviors. Survival was no longer a matter of individual effort alone. It required observation, planning, and, at times, collective ingenuity. In this crucible of competition, the first threads of human adaptability and intelligence began to take form, setting the stage for the next chapter of evolution. The Pliocene world was not only shaped by shifting landscapes, but also by the relentless rhythm of seasons. Rainfall waxed and waned, rivers swelled and shrank, and the abundance of edible plants fluctuated with a precision only nature could orchestrate. For early hominins, survival meant understanding this rhythm, predicting scarcity, and moving with the land itself. Food was never guaranteed. Each season brought new challenges, each dry spell a test of ingenuity. In response, early humans may have followed migratory patterns, not unlike the herbivores whose movements they observed. Herds of antelope, elephants, and other grazers dictated where vegetation would thrive, revealing clues to sustenance that could sustain small groups. Knowing when to travel, which areas were rich in tubers or fruits, and how to avoid predators during these journeys required acute observation and memory. Migration was not aimless wandering. It was a sophisticated strategy, a dance with the environment choreographed by necessity. Scarcity demanded creativity in diet and resourcefulness in gathering. Roots were unearthed from dry soil, insects harvested from decaying logs, and small mammals hunted or scavenged when other options failed. Seasonal cycles forced hominins to diversify their strategies, blending foraging, opportunistic hunting, and careful planning to navigate a world where abundance was fleeting and danger omnipresent. These patterns likely shaped social dynamics as well. Traveling long distances to follow food sources required cooperation, communication, and shared knowledge. Groups that could coordinate effectively, teaching younger members the roots and rhythms of the land, increased their chances of survival. In this way, environmental pressures encouraged early forms of social learning, creating bonds reinforced by necessity and shared experience. Imagine standing on an open plain, scanning the horizon for signs of life, deciding whether to move toward distant hills where rain promises edible vegetation or stay put and risk scarcity. What strategies would you invent? How would you decide where to find your next meal in a world dictated by seasonal change? Share your thoughts in the comments. Consider the challenges early humans faced and the ingenuity required to turn scarcity into survival. In the dynamic landscapes of 3.2 million years ago, survival was not only a matter of individual skill, but of cooperation. Early hominins began to discover that the challenges of the savanna, scarce food, predation, and seasonal change, could be mitigated through shared knowledge and collective effort. Eating was not just a biological necessity, it became a social act, a vehicle for communication, learning, and trust. Evidence suggests that early humans may have shared food within groups, distributing resources to those who could not immediately procure them. A tuber dug up in one area could feed multiple individuals, while a carcass scavenged from predators could be broken down and shared strategically. These behaviors fostered bonds and reinforced social hierarchies, teaching the young how to navigate the environment and which resources were most reliable. In this way, culture emerged not as abstract tradition, but as a practical solution to daily survival. The preparation and processing of food also hint at early cultural practices. Tools used to crush, cut, or scrape could be handled collectively, with more experienced individuals demonstrating techniques to novices. Sharing knowledge about which plants were safe, which roots required soaking, and how to access animal fat would have created a subtle yet vital network of information. This transmission of knowledge is the first inkling of culture embedded in behavior. Lessons carried forward not just in memory, but in the survival strategies of the group. Social eating also influenced cognition, anticipating the actions of others, coordinating joint foraging, and negotiating the distribution of scarce resources demanded foresight, empathy, and strategic thinking. These interactions may have reinforced early communication skills, paving the way for language and collaborative problem-solving. In essence, the way hominins gathered, processed, and shared food helped to shape the architecture of the mind itself. By viewing sustenance as a social enterprise, early humans transformed eating into an act that was both practical and adaptive. They were no longer isolated foragers. They were members of cooperative units, learning, sharing, and innovating together. This networked approach to survival would become a cornerstone of human evolution, demonstrating that in the vast savannas, community and culture were as crucial as strength and cunning. The whispers of the past are etched in stone, bone, and tooth. Fossils serve as time capsules, offering fragments of life that existed 3.2 million years ago. Each enamel groove, each isotopic signature, each fossilized footprint tells a story of adaptation, survival, and ingenuity. Through these remnants, we can reconstruct the diets, movements, and behaviors of early hominins, revealing a world of both struggle and ingenuity. Dental morphology offers particularly compelling insights. Wear patterns on teeth show evidence of processing both hard and fibrous foods, indicating a flexible diet that included roots, nuts, seeds, and occasional animal protein. Isotopic analyses further confirm this diversity, revealing shifts in consumption that correspond to the expansion of grasslands and the retreat of forests. Every mark on a tooth is a snapshot of choice, preference, and necessity in a changing environment. Stone tools complement this narrative. Archaeological evidence shows that early hominins not only found but actively modified objects to aid in food extraction. Scraping marks on bones, fractured seeds, and sharpened edges on stones tell of intentionality and problem-solving. The ability to create, use, and pass on these tools demonstrates early cognition and learning, a bridge between survival and innovation. Fossilized footprints and skeletal remains reveal patterns of movement, cooperation, and social structure. Trackways suggest group coordination, perhaps seasonal migrations following food availability. Limb proportions hint at endurance walking and foraging strategies adapted to open savannas. These physical clues, combined with dietary evidence, depict early humans as observant, versatile, and strategic participants in their ecosystem. By piecing together these fossilized lessons, we see more than a species surviving. We see a lineage experimenting with life. The evidence speaks of adaptability, intelligence, and the relentless pursuit of sustenance. In each fragment of ancient bone, we uncover the story of a world that shaped our ancestors' choices and, ultimately, the evolution of humanity itself. Fossils are not mere remnants. They are narratives etched into time, guiding us to understand how early humans navigated the delicate balance between nature's challenges and their own ingenuity. The dietary transformations that began 3.2 million years ago shaped far more than what early humans ate. They redefined what it meant to survive. As the Earth's climate shifted and forests gave way to vast grasslands, early hominins learned to see opportunity where others saw scarcity. They experimented, adapted, and in doing so, ignited the spark of resilience that would become the essence of humanity itself. The omnivorous flexibility that arose during the Pliocene was not just a reaction to environmental change, it was a triumph of intelligence over circumstance. The ability to process roots, seeds, and animal matter provided the nutritional foundation that would one day fuel a growing brain. Each choice, each adaptation, each moment of discovery in the savanna contributed to the slow rise of consciousness, foresight, and cooperation. These were the building blocks of civilization, written long before cities or language existed. Evolution responded in kind. Stronger jaws and enamel reflected dietary diversity, while the need to plan and share food shaped cognition and community. Every meal became an act of learning. To know which plants healed and which harmed when the rains would return and where herds would migrate, this knowledge was survival, and passing it down was the beginning of culture. When we trace these roots, we discover that the human journey is inseparable from the story of adaptation. Our ancestors were not merely victims of climate, they were innovators of necessity, reshaping their behavior to match a restless planet. The lessons they left behind echo in us still: adaptability, cooperation, and the relentless drive to turn hardship into opportunity. As we close this journey into the deep past, take a moment to reflect on that legacy. The same curiosity that led early humans to test new foods and tools still drives our exploration today. If you enjoyed uncovering how our ancestors' diets shaped evolution, leave a comment sharing what insight surprised you most, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that bring ancient worlds vividly to life.